first stop on the winery tour of Niagara on the Lake today will be the Konzelmann estate, which is waterfront, so that's the one we'll be checking out first.
You've arrived.
To the Konzelmann Winery. This is our first stop of the day. Pretty. Hey!
So, this is our bottling room. Most wineries do not bottle their own wine. Most wineries use a mobile service. And the reason isn't because of the cost of equipment or the room or anything. The reason being is this room is only used about 70 days a year. So it's a pretty bad investment. Then again, we're one of the older wineries in Ontario. We're number 7 out of close to 200 now. So back in those days, there was no such thing as a mobile service. That's why we have our own bottling line. We always use brand new bottles, as every winery does. They're put on this belt here, they're fed to this machine. This machine here picks up the bottle, sprays distilled water on the inside, you get rid of contaminants, things like dust and that, and then gives a shot of air to dry it out. From there it goes to this machine. This machine here fills the bottles with wine to a predetermined height, predetermined by bottle size, type of closure. Once it's filled with wine, it goes to this machine. It does one of two things. It either puts a cork in the bottle or a screw cap on the bottle. If it gets a cork, it goes to this machine where it gets the aluminum caps put on top of the heat shrunk, and then finally the labeling machine over here. I did mention screw caps and I mentioned cork. What does it mean if it has a screw cap? It means drink the wine now. It's not going to get any better by leaving it in the bottle. It's going to deteriorate over the next 3 to 4 years. Year 1, year 2, good drinking. Year 3, you're losing fruitiness. Year 4, well, you may as well cook with it. But why the screw cap? Because 10 years ago, Portugal, the main supplier of cork, and of course cork is the bark off a cork tree, said we're running out of cork trees. So 2 things happened. Brazil planted cork trees, and yet I've never seen a cork from there. And some guy in the US actually invented the synthetic cork, the plastic cork. It didn't work very well. It didn't breathe like a normal cork. When you compress a normal cork to put in a bottle, it compresses evenly around the perimeter. When you compress a synthetic cork, it tends to get a ridge. That ridge can leak wine out, leak air in. You break corkscrews getting out of the bottle. A thing of the past in Canada, still a couple left in the US. But that's why they invented this screw cap. Number 1, to overcome the shortage of cork, and number 2, to replace the synthetic cork. I agree. But now, of course, you know what Portugal say. We have all kinds of cork, we have no customers. So why wouldn't we put a cork in this bottle? Because cork, because it's the bark off a cork tree, could be contaminated, could be diseased. Why would we risk putting it into a batch of wine? And by a batch, I'm talking 15,000 liters of wine that's ready to drink now, wine that's not going to age, wine that's not going to evolve in any way, where for the same price we put a screw cap on, knowing no bacteria is getting into that bottle. And that's why we use a screw cap over cork. And on the second wine we try inside today, you're going to feel on your palate when and why we use, of course. Any questions?
Do the bottles roll down this ramp, or what is this?
No. People do. Want to try it?
Sure.
Bottles are dumped up here. Empty cases go down this. The bottles go off the line at the end. There's a guy on both sides. They're putting the bottles in the cases. The cases come along here. They get sealed. They come to here. Herbert drives the tow motor in here. Hopefully he doesn't hit anything, and then he takes them out. 7 people operating here. We can do up to 10,000 bottles a day with 7 people.
Wow.
So let's go to the vineyard, where we should have started, but I think this was better because now nobody interrupted us.
Okay.
Let's go to the vineyard. We can stick together, and last person out, can you close the door behind us? So that's Konzelmann's house down there. So she got her wish by wanting to live on the lake. They live right on the lake. Their daughter lives in this house over here. You either have to be very tall or standing at the back to see it, but that's her house. Okay. Now, if it was a clear day, we would have started this whole tour on the lookout up here, because if you look across the lake just to the left of their home, you'd see the skyline of Toronto. It's exactly 52 kilometers across the lake. That's 34 miles. But we are always cooler here in the summer than Toronto, and warmer here than it is in Toronto in the winter. Reason being is the microclimate we have. Microclimate caused by 3 things. Number 1, that light breeze you feel. That's here 365 days a year. Number 2 is Lake Ontario. And number 3, about 12 kilometers this way, that's about just under 6 miles, is the Niagara Escarpment. It starts in Queenston, Ontario. Queenston's halfway between here and the falls, and was the falls thousands of years ago. And it runs north some 900 kilometers, 600 miles, all the way to Tobermory in northern Ontario. Also known, of course, as the Bruce Hiking Trail. So what happens in the winter, that breeze comes across the lake, it picks up the warmth of the water, because the lake never freezes, hits the escarpment, rolls back and sits over all the vineyards at about 15 meters, 45 feet. And it sits there until we need it. So for instance, in the spring, if all of a sudden the vines are in bud and we're going to get a frost, what do? We turn on those windmills you see all over the place, which brings that warm layer of air down to the vines, protecting them from getting hit by frost. Every time I say windmills, I see heads go like this. You won't find any on this vineyard. We don't need them because we're constantly getting that breeze. If you go to the road, you're going to see them there and all the way everywhere else. They're not cheap. They're $40,000 each, except to our American friends. They're only $30,000. They turn 360 degrees every 5 minutes. Each one covers a 10-acre area, and the majority of them are run on Chevrolet V8 engines, either on natural gas or propane. So our harvest has been over for a long time, back in November, except for ice wine. And to call it ice wine, we're controlled by the VQA, Vintners Quality Alliance, which originally was a marketing group, now a regulator, and they state the temperature must be for at least 10 hours before you pick the grapes. -8, that's 20 Fahrenheit. Normally picked between -10 and -12, that's 14 Fahrenheit. This past winter, we picked at -18, 0 Fahrenheit, February 15th. When we pick the grapes, they have to be frozen solid, hard as a marble. When we crush them inside that room where we just were, they also must be frozen, which means it's a nighttime harvest. Because if we picked in the daytime, the sun would hit the grape and melt it. So it definitely is a nighttime harvest. We get very little juice off an ice wine grape. If you're going to take an ice wine, a normal volume of wine, and make it out of ice wine grapes, it would take 10 to 15 times the volume of grapes to do so. Now, of course, ice wine originally was a German wine, and yet 90% of all ice wine in the world today is produced right here in Niagara. Grapes behind me, the first few rows you see are Chardonnay grapes. Once harvest is done, we prune back to 1, 2, or 3 branches per vine. Then we tie them off horizontally because we want the growth to grow up, not out and down. That's the reason for that, of course, is so that the morning sun can hit the grapes coming this way and the afternoon sun hitting the other way from the west. These grapes last week were flowers. That's how they start off. But the grapes are self-pollinating. So in other words, a little breeze and they pollinate themselves. So last week they were flowers, this week they're grapes. What's going to happen now, they'll be coming around taking the leaves off that are in front of the grapes to allow it to get more sun, so we can get some photosynthesis happening, therefore getting sugar content, because harvest is based on sugar. The rootstock that goes into the ground is the same rootstock no matter where you go, anywhere in North America or Europe. It's called North American rootstock, even though it was developed in France over 100 years ago when Floxia went through Europe and wiped out all the grapes there. It's disease resistant. So every vine we have has to be grafted onto that rootstock by notching it, putting a branch in, putting wax around it, and waiting 5 years until we've actually got grapes that we can use in the production of wine. Grapes with enough acidity, grapes with enough sugar content. Now every grape we do pick, mind you, goes over here. So every grape we pick is dumped in the hopper. The hopper feeds it to this little machine down here. It does two things. It breaks the skin of the grape and removes the stem. The stem goes up that blue chute, ends up in a bucket. We take that bucket to the back of the vineyard. We mix with grape skins, grape seeds, and mushroom compost. We let it rot for 3 years, and then that becomes fertilizer. We left it 4 years, all the nutrients would be gone. Grapes themselves go up the silver tube and go inside, and you know what happens when they go inside. Any questions? Do you want a drink? Oh yeah. Let's go. If everybody can stick together, that would be great, because this door does lock behind us.
Trying to figure out what you would have with that.
She said you could drizzle it on cheesecake,
Ice cream.
blue cheese.
Blue cheese. If you like blue cheese, it cuts it really well.
She said the inside fixed up really nice. Yeah, I had some yesterday.
Ooh, okay.
This is right. Let's see about this one.
Nice and light.
This vineyard seems to produce a lot more wine than the one that we were at in Portugal. America.